That's not necessarily true. Some commercial easements. Does an easement engross terminate when the owner dies, was the question. Not all the time. Depends who the engrossed person is to. If it's to a power company or a utility, no, it stays there. Commercial easements may, like that Sears or the Kmart and Marsh had a cross parking lot easement agreement. That may, because the new owner may not want that easement, may not want that person allowed to come over there. When you create an easement, it's very simple. Both parties agree. Up until now, all these easements is real simple. When A built B, he agreed with himself to build the easement, so it was real simple. All right? There are some cases in which easements are not simple and they are not agreeable. They are actually taken or created automatically. Okay? The first one being what's called an easement by necessity. An easement by necessity. Remember, possession is one of your rights. So you've got the farmer that owns 100-acre wood. 100-acre woods. Who lives in the 100-acre woods? Pooh. Very good. Winnie the Pooh lives in the 100-acre woods. Let's say he sells 10 acres right out of the middle. He can't do that. Well, he can, but possession is one of your rights, so there's got to be a way. So what happens is the title company would just go in and create an easement by necessity and give him the right to cross the farmer's land to get to the 10 acres he sold.
So who gets to dictate where the easement's located?
I don't know. I mean, there would be a lot of discussion. It kind of, they would probably go, well, we can't do that side because there's trees. It would cost too much. Can't do this side. It may not be the most convenient one, but at least there's a way there. Maybe it's the furthest route out, but it's the closest or the easiest to create. It would probably be by an agreement. I've never seen one of these created because typically what happens is the title company catches this long before they close, and they will tell the owner, you got to go make an easement before we'll close this. All right? So once again, this is one of those concepts that's theoretical in nature that I've never seen actually in practice. Because what would happen in the real world is the title company would go, we're not closing this. You got to give them away. So go out, you hire the surveyor, you hire this, you file the agreements and do all that. Once the easement gets recorded, we'll then put it on the title work, then we'll close. All right? But in this theory, just to explain what it is, it would just get created because you can't sell the 10 acres to the guy without him having a path to it. So it's called an easement by necessity. The next one is what's called an easement by prescription or a prescriptive easement. You guys are this is going to sound kind of familiar to you because it's very similar to something you think you know, and we'll talk about. A prescriptive easement is when there are 5 things that have to happen, all right? Let's say in this example that they've created this easement by necessity, and the guy that owns the 10 acres every morning gets up, goes to work, he drives out the easement by necessity, goes around the 100 acres to the interstate. He wakes up one morning and says, you know what, I'm going to sneak out the back door because it's closer to the highway. So I'm going to sneak across the farmer's land the other way. If he does it long enough and under certain conditions, he can actually create an appurtenant easement. But there are several things that have to happen. Has to be open, meaning he just does it whenever he wants to. Does it in the morning, comes home, does it. Has to be notorious, meaning they know it's him. Has to be hostile. That's without the true owner's permission. It has to be continuous and uninterrupted. Most states, it can range from 10 to 21 years before this happens. Indiana's like 9. You got to do this like 9 years before it can actually happen. And it has to be continuous. But we have this thing called tacking. It's in your book, like a thumbtack. So Josh does it, sneaks out the back way for 5 years. I buy the 10 acres from Josh, and he goes, we've been driving out the back way because it's closer for the last 5 years. So I start doing it. I do it for 4 years. I tack my 4 on the back of his 5 and go, that's 9. And now we can get an easement. But it also has to be uninterrupted. So if Josh does it for 5, I buy it, and I'm too scared to do it, so I don't do it. And then I sell it to you and go, hey, he did it for 5 years, and you do it for 4, that doesn't count because it was interrupted. So you'd be starting over again. So it has to be continuous and uninterrupted, but you can use tacking to get to that time frame.
So what if the owner is like, you have to stop doing that?
If the owner gives you permission, that's the easiest way because it's not hostile anymore. He could say, I see you doing that. Go ahead and do that. But, during the months that I harvest, I don't want you to do that. But he gave him permission for the...
What if it says specifically no? And you do
Well, then it's trespassing.
Well, it's trespassing.
It could be trespassing anyway. Yeah.
Is that the same if you put a fence up?
Is that the same as if you put a fence up and they do it? They could eventually create an easement. This is actually happening with my first ex-wife. We live in a housing addition right in front of the playground, and we picked this house and had it built. Our 2 neighbors put up privacy fences, so all the children now walk along the privacy fence through my ex-wife's yard to get to the playground. And I literally told her, you can make that a public walkway if you're not careful. You got to be careful because all of this stuff could happen. So I literally told her, get a sign that says, hey, this is my yard, but I'm giving you permission to walk through it. Now it can never be because you've taken the hostile component away. It's got to be hostile. That means without their permission. It's got to be open, notorious, continuous, hostile. All right? Those are what they call a prescriptive easement. Now you can terminate an easement, and there are several ways to terminate the easement. If you don't need it anymore, say A decides he wants his 10 acres back and he buys B's house and tears it down and now he owns 2 5-acre lots and he pushes them back together to make one. You don't need the easement, so it's gone. Suppose B actually decides to have his own driveway and cuts through the forest and makes his own real driveway, so there's no need for it now. It can be gone. So there are several ways to get rid of easements. There is a thing called a license. Think of a license as a very watered down version. It's almost like a gentleman's agreement, all right? It happens between neighbors. It's an unformalized agreement, meaning it's not recorded. All these easements get recorded. And a license would be like you and your neighbor, and you go, hey, bud, I see you got a new camper. If you need to park it in the back, you can drive around my shed to get a nice straight shot to park. That would be a license. You're giving your neighbor permission to use your property to, turn the car around or whatever. Store your boat back there. That's fine. That's an interest that your neighbor has. But it's called a license because it's unformalized. You can terminate a license either at will, means you just get in an argument with your neighbor and you go, hey, I hate you, take your boat off my land. It's a mean thing to say. But if either party dies, that'll terminate a license. Just because the last guy let me drive on his yard to move my boat doesn't mean the new guy's going to. Or upon the sale of the property. Death, sale, at will. Those will terminate a license. You don't have to go through a formal recording like you would in true easement and all that. An encroachment is a physical entity on your property. You built a shed out in the back corner of your lot and you missed. And now 2 feet of your shed is on my property. Too bad, so sad. That's my property. You put it on my property, it's now mine. I'm going to take the back of your shed off. The other one that you have a lot of fights about, trees. The tree, your limb is hanging over my property. I'm going to cut the limb off. It's my airspace. I own the airspace. I like to sunbathe in my Speedo. You guys will never get that vision out of your head now. What are you laughing at, Miguel? It was a good day. You're lucky I even put that on. I live in Brown County, surrounded by woods. Don't come to my house without calling. That's all I'm saying. So you could say, yeah, that's in my airspace. Cut the limb off. Now I can sunbathe. All right? Just make sure you don't kill their tree that's on their lot, because now you got another problem. Because now you've killed something on their lot. All right? So an encroachment is a physical entity on that property. These are all, wow, there's a bunch in the book, not a lot on the overheads for some reason. These are all encumbrances, non-monetary interests. Let's talk about the next one.